Welcome again to another episode of Sneaks, Rhymes, and Life. I'm your host, Lionel McDonald, and today we have a guest on, my boy Isaac from work. Isaac, welcome to the pod.
Lionel, thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I know this is a conversation we've had off the mic plenty of times, so I'm happy to make this official and notarize this right here.
So, obviously, Isaac, you're full aware that Sneaks, Rhymes, and Life is about sneakers and hip hop. To tell us the impact of sneakers and hip hop in your world.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been a part and a listener of hip hop culture my whole life, practically. Born in the late 80s, so inclined more to, mid to late 90s fashion and music and culture. And, sneakers is definitely a part of that, just as long as the music is too. Being a child of the 90s, Jordan's was a status symbol that was attainable, but at the same time wasn't really attainable. So, I carry that over into adulthood at the same time. And it carried over into today. I'm blessed having a career where I can be a part of, sneaker culture and also do what I do well with the whole talent acquisition thing. So, like I said, I'm very blessed to be here today doing this and having this conversation with you.
Okay, amazing. So, to enlighten everyone on the conversation, Isaac and I have been going back and forth, and it would be fun if Steve MacArthur was here because he would argue on the other side of the spectrum. But as we approach December 4th, and it's probably the most recognizable birthday, maybe outside Notorious B.I.G., which is the 21st of May. That's my birthday also as well, along with Havoc from Mobb Deep. But December 4th is the birthday of one Shawn Carter, otherwise known as Jay-Z. He is turning 55 this year. Oh, we have our first diamond sighting already on the pod. So
Put it
so
out there.
Isaac is a Jay-Z connoisseur, a Jay-Z fan, a Jay-Z stan. Call him what you want.
Whoa,
But
whoa, whoa. We're not gonna do the S word.
I
No
have to, I have
stand,
to,
no
I have to
stand,
pull that back.
no
Okay, all
stand.
right,
I'm definitely
okay,
a
fair
listener,
enough,
a connoisseur, but no
fair enough.
stand.
I've already overstepped my bounds
Yes,
on
yes.
this podcast,
I have to draw the
but
lines early.
we are going to talk everything Jay-Z, the good, the bad, and the questionable. So, with Jay-Z being the first main topic, the topic of this podcast, Isaac, maybe you as a fan of Jay-Z, maybe you could give the listeners, and again, this is available on Spotify along with Apple Music, several other podcasts, distribution areas, and obviously it's going to be available the video version on YouTube. But Isaac, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you can give us a brief history on S. Carter.
All right, all right. So, as mentioned, Shawn Carter was born on December 4th, 1969. Came of age in the Marcy Projects in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, New York. The youngest of four children, raised by Gloria, a single mother. Fun fact, he attended Eli Whitney High School with Busta Rhymes and Notorious B.I.G. So, I mean, it's in there. It's paramount. It's in the blood. It's in the lineage. But I'll get into a little bit more of that. Much is made about his doings before he became the rapper that we know now, and a lot of that's off the record. So I'll focus on what's really more on the record. From there, he was mentored by a local rapper named Jaz-O. Hove's nickname prior to meeting Jazz was actually Jazzy, and they changed it to Jay-Z for them to work together as Jay-Z and Jaz-O. So that's a point that a lot of people didn't know there. Jay started out as a battle rapper, and he was Jazz's protege, being a rapper who would freestyle on tours with other artists such as Big Daddy Kane. Struggling to land a major record label deal, he aligned with Damon Dash and Kareem Biggs Burke to start their own label in 1995, Rockefeller Records. A year later, Jay released his debut album, Reasonable Doubt. 17 albums later, multiple business ventures, Hall of Fame inductions, Grammys, and quite frankly, the greatest rap career of all time. We're here to discuss everything Jay-Z.
Okay, well, I don't know if I could have done it any better than that you just did. So well done, Isaac. Bravo to you. So that's a brief history of Jay-Z. So Isaac, how did you become a Jay-Z fan?
I was thinking about that in preparation for this conversation, and it goes back as far as, and it's going to be kind of funny to mention, and it sounds kind of simple, but I think back to the Hard Knock Life music video. Like I said, I was born in the late 80s, so when that came out, I was very much like, I look like someone in the video, but one of the kids for the most part.
Hmm.
And when you do something like that, when you have kids that look like kids and sound like kids are going to relate to it. They're going to want to be a part of it. So immediately I was drawn into the video. I remember there was a part of the video where he walked into like a bodega and there was a little kid wearing these crazy sunglasses and he had this little, juice, a little bottle of juice. And it just resonated so much with me because I could see myself in that kid. And immediately that, I knew this was my favorite rapper at that point there. The song was so catchy. You heard it everywhere. From then I was kind of, like you said, I became a connoisseur and a big fan. And from there, everything became a lot better. The music, I was someone who related to it. I'll mention later on this call here that there's a Jay-Z song and lyric for every occasion, and that's been the case as well. So I like to chalk it back as far as 1998 Hard Knock Life, just seeing that video, but it's gone on so much further from there.
So is that kind of your gateway song to Jay-Z, Hard Knock Life, or were you on Reasonable Doubt when Reasonable Doubt came out? Because I'm a little bit older. Like that's when I first heard
I think,
Jay-Z.
oh,
Dead Prez was the first song that I heard. And it's like, wow, this guy just sampled Nas. And then you hear the rest of Reasonable Doubt, and it's absolutely phenomenal. 22 twos, like the Evils, like Brooklyn's Finest is my favorite song on the album. 22 twos sometimes gets me. That's like 1-2 for me, but that is like that I think is an amazing album, but it just never, in my eyes, exploded the way that it should have. Like it should be revered as one of the greatest albums. And I think as we're gonna we're gonna go the discography and kind of give it a ranking top to bottom. Um, in my opinion, that album is like in the upper echelon of albums of all albums. And I think people talk about Jay-Z's catalog as being one of the best and the most diverse catalogs, but I don't know if people talk about the Reasonable Doubt as being in that stratosphere of greatest albums as we've ever heard in hip hop. So would love to hear from you. Let's take a look at the discography. So we're gonna throw, we already said we're throwing the Linkin Park album. Not that it's not good, not that we don't want to rank it. I didn't rank it. Let's just qualify. I didn't rank it. You ranked it. It's just gonna mess up my whole list and the whole flow. So what do you want to do? What do you want to do? You want to go bottom
yeah,
to top, or you want to go top to bottom?
I think you got to go top. There's a lot of albums, so I think you got to go top to bottom, to
Okay,
be
let's go
honest.
top to bottom. Who you got as one?
Yeah, I think we got to go that way there. So, I mean, I don't mind going head first if you want me to as a guest, and I can let you know what I have as my
Fire
number
away.
one.
Guests always go first on this
Okay.
podcast.
Number one, I have the Blueprint, and I have that
Okay.
actually marked as a classic. So I went a little in depth with this. I put down the number of albums. So number one, I have Blueprint. I have where it ranks as a classic, and I have the number one song on that album. In my opinion, was "Hard to City." Number one album for Jay Z is. I
Okay.
feel it's Jay Z's best. In addition to that, I mean, the cultural significance is there. When I was studying about it, I just realized it was preserved the National Recording Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. I mean, it's one of those albums that's gonna stand the test of time. It's one of those albums I feel like it's Jay-Z at his absolute best. It's him at his peak, him as lyrical prowess. Rockefeller Records, you have Kanye on his come up just as a producer making the hottest beats of his career. Just Blaze as well. I mean, Jay-Z's in his zone trying to, gain that throne, as we're going to talk about later on, and that crown. He's trying to, really take on his position as the best rapper, not in just New York, but in the game. And I think this album was that stamping point.
Okay. So I would say if I choose the best album, I would choose Reasonable Doubt. If I choose my favorite album, I would choose the Black Album. So number one is Reasonable Doubt. We're going arbitrarily and without any argument. I think just Reasonable Doubt, the body of work. I think just the context, and I wouldn't say that this mafioso style he was the one that invented it existed pre the release of this album. We had Koji Rap. If you know, I'm going to exclude what Nas did on It Was Written, and I'm going to definitely exclude uh Ray and Ghost on Only Built for Cuban Links. Koji Rap is what started this mafioso rap many years prior. Like we're talking the late '80s or early '90s. So but I think Jay-Z put his own spin to it. And I think, what was so refreshing, if you hear the Jay-Z rapping before the album came out and then what he sounded like on
Whole
the
different
album,
style.
it was like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, this guy figured it out. And you know what I compare it to? I compare it to, it's funny, you've already said the Blueprint. We have the song Takeover on that album, and he goes after Prodigy.
yeah,
Prodigy is exactly the same way. Prodigy and Havoc sounded totally different on their debut album, Juvenile Hell. And then when they did the
yeah.
Infamous, it's like, these guys are 2 years older than they sound like this, and the production sounds like this. It's a totally different game. But anyways, you don't want to
Yeah.
disrail. Please give us your number two.
No, no, no. You know what? I mean, very similar to you. Reasonable Doubt was number two for me.
Yeah.
It was just, an amazing debut album. I feel it's Jay-Z in his zone subject matter wise. So as you mentioned, mafioso talk. I feel like, he was kind of the inventor of the coke rap. Well, not the inventor, but like the perfectionist, the stuff you hear Pusha T rapping about, the stuff you hear about, so the young Jeezys, the guys that, the modern day, mafioso rappers. Reasonable Doubt was kind of the blueprint for that there. It was kind of the setting stone. I feel like it's one of those, it's a great album. My only reason for kind of knocking it from number one to number two was a little bit more filler than the Blueprint. I think there was maybe a one or two more skippable track than the Blueprint, but
Okay.
I'm in the same boat as you. I think it's one of the greatest rap albums of all time. I feel like you can learn and you can teach so much from that album right there.
So I'll now go with my favorite album on the in the Jay-Z catalog. So number two is the Black Album. I think just the combination of so many different producers all creating different sounds, but how it sounds as a collective, that's
Yeah.
why it gets me.
Yeah.
I think Jay-Z goes into a variety of different subject matter, but how it sounds as a collective, and it was done by literally so many different producers came together, like DJ Premier, which he's done countless songs for Jay-Z, couldn't even get on the album because his song didn't make the cut.
Mm.
So that's my number two. Give us your number three.
My number three, just like you said, Black Album. That's my third. So Blueprint's a classic, Reasonable Doubt's a classic. Black Album to me is also a classic. The best song of the Black Album to me was PSA. But personally speaking, my favorite song on the Black Album is Lucifer. I
Oh,
feel
that's a
like
good one.
I feel as Jay-Z at his like best rapping period. Just
Yeah.
him kind of floating through different accents and just the subject matter there. I feel like it was effortless for him on that track there. As you mentioned, amazing collection of hits. Just a sonic approach, rapping on different beats. I feel like it's kind of transformed what a lot of rappers are doing. I remember then, before he had this album, most rappers would kind of work off of, maybe one or two different producers or, kind of keeping a similar sound and keep it very consistent. This is a whole different approach altogether. And I think this defines Jay-Z's peak.
Yep. Okay. I can agree with you on that. And I think that again, this is an album that, the three albums that were mentioned, because yeah, number three is Blueprint for me. But I think what you notice between Blueprint and the Black Album, they have something for everyone. It's like a collective, if you're talking about just the Black Album,
Yeah.
Dirt Off Your Shoulder is for the clubs. Moment of Clarity is a thought-provoking song. Um, Justify My Thug is a much slower tempo song. Encore is the total opposite, and
Oh,
it is high energy, and that's my favorite song because I'm a high energy guy. So,
yeah.
but yeah, the Blueprint, I think um, it's a well done piece, and I think this may be outside what Kanye did for himself. This is the best that we ever got from Kanye in terms of him producing for anybody else. Like I
Oh,
think he
yeah.
was at his
Easily.
peak producing
Oh,
for
yeah.
others, but his peak was producing this particular album for Jay. I think this
It's
is where it now gets interesting. Is what he I for sure believe that the top three you could just shake it
yeah,
up and
mix and
let's
match.
see how
Yeah.
it comes out. But what do you have from beyond here? So give us four.
Okay. Well, I believe that Jay-Z has five classic albums.
Okay.
So I'll start off the
And
top.
I would qualify, I would say the three of them I would say are classic albums to me. And I think I know what you're gonna say, so please give it to
Okay.
us.
Let's see. Let's see if we're on the same page. I have volume two listed as number 4.
Really?
Volume 2. I mean, this was the Black Album before the Black Album. This was the collection of hits. This was Jay-Z goes mainstream. I remember there was a little bit of there was a situation where there was hints of retirement at this point when this came out as well. I felt this was the album that kind of really launched into the mainstream with classic tracks. I mean, Hard Knock, like I mentioned before, Money Cash Hoes. I mean, you got A Week Ago. You have so many tracks. Money. Yeah, the track with Jermaine Dupri, Money and a Thing. Like you have so many tracks that are timeless off this album. Now, I know this is kind of the album that separates him from that heavy mafioso talk to kind of hitting that mainstream. It's a little bit more of a poppy album, but I feel when you look at the brevity and the total mass of this whole album, I feel it's a classic just for what's on the album itself and the impact. I mean, this album really kind of launched into a different stratosphere.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I think the best track on that album is Hard Knock Life.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm not saying you're biased, but
A
that's
little
the one
partial.
that rings true for you. For me, number 4 is Watch the Throne.
Okay.
And I absolutely love the album. I think the collaboration is the greatest collaboration album we've ever seen from two major artists coming together and actually coexisting. Now they don't coexist right now, but at the time, this was Big Brother and Little Brother doing an album, and it was nothing short of absolutely incredible. So, Watch the Throne, I got his number 4. Give us your number 5.
Number 5 is Watch the Throne. Another
Okay.
classic for me as well. I mean, Who Gonna Stop Me is what I have listed as the best song. Jay-Z in his prime, Kanye in his prime. I mean, it's Jordan and Kobe just shooting hoops, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's a cohesive album that just feels big.
Yeah.
From the beginning to the end, it is just a big album. And I feel to me personally, this is the last great Kanye album before he really went off the rails and took all those lefts with Yeezus. I understand, like, with the recording session
No, I
was
think
really heavy.
again, if Stephen MacArthur was here, and Steve, I'm giving you this is like multiple shout outs in you've never been on the podcast, you're getting another shout out. Stephen MacArthur is like the biggest Yeezus fan there is. Him and I actually went to a
Jesus.
concert and we saw Yeezus. We were on the floor at the ACC when it was called the ACC.
Yeah.
And it was like one of those shows that like he is going from one end of the arena to the other, and it was
Yeah.
incredible. Like the show was
Listen,
out of this world.
I liked Yeezus as an album. I went to the concert and I thought it was
Okay.
really like ambitious and it was different and it was but I was like, okay, this guy is going in a different direction than I'm even ready for. And I wasn't, like you can tell there was a major deviation from what he was doing with, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy to
Yes.
Watch the Throne. And I think it's a darker turn. I feel like Watch the Throne is that last bit of what we had prior to what happened with Yeezus, in my opinion. And I think
Yeah.
this was, in my opinion, the last great Kanye rapping album.
I give you that. I give you that. So number 5, it's the most recent album. There's a lot of controversy because of what the subject matter is, but 444 is the one that I have as number 5. I think there's what I think I appreciate so much about the album, the level of transparency from this guy
Yeah.
that we've never seen before. I think it for me, it caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Like for him to be, I don't know what it is, a level of honesty, to peek behind the curtain at least, to think about thoughts and feelings and admission to things that he did that he wasn't even proud of, him to be vulnerable and talk about his family. That's why I like the album.
Absolutely.
It was totally different. Like, I've already said, Reasonable Doubt, Black Album, Blueprint, Watch the Throne, they don't sound anything like
No.
444. And
Yeah.
444 may be the last album we ever get. We're talking about a 55-year-old rapper that is a billionaire that has really nothing to prove. So it could be the last album we get,
It could be.
but I think it's definitely one that I would have in my top 5. So give us your number 6.
444 is definitely high on my list. It's not number 6 for me, but it's close. Number 6 for me is actually like it's weird because it's number 6, and I know we talked about this, was kind of threw you off. Personal favorite, American Gangster. I think I don't have it as a classic, but almost a cult classic in a sense. Personally, I feel Party Life is like, the best track on that album. I love the idea that it's a concept album and almost like a soundtrack album, and it takes him back to that mafioso, coke rap situation, which I felt he was at his best. Just back in his zone subject matter wise, and he's floating on different beats. You have the I Know, you have the Party Life, you have American Dreaming. The production on this album is it's almost one of his best that he has. The beat selection is so tight, but the way he's rapping to these beats, he's it's the idea is him being Frank Lucas, from the movie American Gangster, and
Yeah.
rapping through the themes of what's going on in the movie. It intertwines with his career and his discography so perfectly. And I feel like, this is probably it's almost like American Gangster, or sorry, it's almost like Reasonable Doubt turned up to 11 in a sense, in a movie form. So I felt that American Gangster to me was number six, just as a personal favorite and just being a really, you know, ambitious, cool concept, soundtrack album.
So that's interesting because I got American Gangster as my number six. I
Okay.
think this is if we were to rename this album, we easily could have called this Reasonable Doubt number two or part two or
There
the
you go.
sequel. Like
Yeah.
the fit between that album and Reasonable Doubt is unparalleled. But it's so
Yeah.
interesting that again, this is the twists and turns of his career. We got something, and I think it took the theme of the movie for him to go into this mode. But we got
Yes.
an album that did not sound like Volume One, Two, or Three, Blueprint One, Two, or Three. It didn't sound like The Dynasty. It didn't sound like Black Album. It didn't sound like the Blueprint. So I think that is what's so unique about this one, and I like it. I'm a fan of Reasonable Doubt. It was out of left field that we kind of went back into that, but you could feel the feeling of the movie, but
Yes.
also the collection of how Jay-Z goes about talking about mafioso. Like it's like I went back to something that I was so comfortable doing, and
Yeah.
to see him rekindle that style and that mindset, that's why I love the album.
Yeah. I always say with that album, it's like, the song Ignorant Shit, for example. I remember
Yeah,
when that song first came out before the album, and it just came out as like a single. And that was kind of his retirement phase. And I was like, man, like this guy still got it. Like he still can rap. And I remember he was at a point where he was in that like 2 or 3 year retirement drop. I always said was like Jordan, Jordan in retirement, but still shooting hoops. So,
yeah,
when you say it's Reasonable Doubt, but a continuation, I feel the exact same way. It's him in his, that rare air, him in his zone doing what he does best.
number seven.
Number seven, we're pretty consistent. 444. I can't say too
Okay.
much more different than what you said. I mean, mature subject matter from Jay-Z, I think was just a very necessary album for his fans. I talk about, he has, a lyric and a song for every situation. And I think this is a situation and this is an album that needed to come up for the younger crowd and also for the maturing crowd and the crowd of Jay-Z fans that are older, people that can relate to different things. People don't want to hear about, selling drugs or, driving a nice car, but, having life situations in a sense. So, just for the amount of gems that he dropped there, I felt, it's crazy because that album came out in 2017. And when you looked at it, that was his best album for the last 10 years. Like he hadn't dropped anything good prior to that album. I think for 3 or 4 albums prior to that. So just being in that rare form, having a great album for 10 years. And like you said, it is the last one he's dropped. So it is the one you have to kind of judge him by most recently. And I felt if it had to be the last album, it was a great parting shot, I thought.
I think that's the challenge now is like the bar has been set by releasing that album. Anything short seems like a waste of time because is he now
Yeah.
going to if
Yeah.
he were to come out an album at 56, would he absolutely feel and the album missed, so he's got to do another one to cement his legacy that he can go do another quality album. I don't think he's going to. Like I think he hit the nail on the head with 444, and I don't think we get anything from, like, you can get him in a song. I don't think you're going to get him on a you're going to get him to get him you get a concept album out of him at this point of his career. He's got nothing to prove anymore.
Yeah. There's no reason, but I mean, he's got it in him. Who knows? Hopefully.
So this is where things become very interesting for me as I look at and I this is I think where our lists will definitely differ from here
Okay.
on out. So
Deviation.
I am going with album, and I'm gonna say like the albums that I truly like, and this is where it ranks. Number seven is the Dynasty. And I
Okay.
absolutely love the Dynasty and how the three MCs fit together. There's a part of me that will always love Memphis Bleak. Wish he became bigger than he ever became. There's a part of me that always thinks that Beanie Siegel just never hit the apex that he should have had. And you look at Rockefeller Records, there's only two guys that really made it. Not to say that
Yeah,
the other guys didn't have money, but they didn't make it like Jay-Z and Kanye did.
that's right.
So I think just how they weave together and how they sound like a group. And even though it's a one album, a and done album, essentially, that's why I got them at number seven.
You don't men you don't mention the mill. So is she not part of this group too? I mean, it was Dynasty, it was four
Well,
people.
we can get ugly now. And is she part of it? Is she not? Yeah, she's on the
Oh
label.
man.
Like, but is she really an artist on her own that would hold weight to say that she's part of
She
a room?
a
In my
major
opinion, no.
chunk
Like
of Dynasty.
she's kind of in and out, if you ask me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I feel like that album, like I ranked that album. I thought I ranked it quite high, and I didn't have it as high as you. And for what I felt of the album was that I felt it was a great attempt for him to allow his artist to shine. Very strong production, but I felt anything that wasn't a Jay-Z verse was filler to me. It was very skippable. I know Beanie Siegel had his moments as well, but it was like it wasn't a point where we really wanted to hear Jay-Z with other rappers, and I felt that it was kind of like they were. When you listen to "Hit 'Em Up" by Tupac, and it's like I want to hear more Tupac, not less the Outlaws. It
Yes.
was kind of that situation. That's what it felt like to me. So I think if he did this album maybe two or three albums later on, it would have the idea of it and putting the artist on would have maybe hit the mark. But I thought at this point here, it was just like, no, I don't want to hear these guys. I want to hear Jay.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. We are now at number eight. What do you got?
Number, number eight. Okay, so my number eight, Volume One, in my lifetime,
Okay.
Volume One. Uh, I feel this is Jay-Z, a gritty version of Jay-Z with street hits. You can see he wanted to touch that commercial life, and he tried to make some mainstream singles like Sunshine that just are just completely different than the rest of the album. So that's why I kind of have it a little ranked a little lower. But lyrically, he's in that rare air. He still has that, that reasonable element to him. He hasn't gotten to that volume two spot where, he rapped about, watering down his rhymes to make sales or whatnot. Volume one, he's still in his essence. He still kind of has who he is. I believe that volume one was where he released Streets is Watching, the movie and the soundtrack as well.
Yeah,
So
because yes, I think Streets is watching. Yeah, Streets is watching is the fifth song on the album.
it's the fifth song as well, right? So that was a kind of a time where he was still an underground artist in a sense, with Reasonable Doubt not really being as mainstream as it could have been, but he was trying to mix that underground sound to the mainstream as well. Very ambitious. I thought it was a strong album. I think, songs like Where I'm From, I mean, that's a classic right there. I wouldn't say the album is, but the song is right there. Amazing beat and just cool subject matter. It's almost, Marcy Projects, and I'm not from there, but I know people from out there are really speaking and singing to those lyrics. So Volume One to me is my eighth ranked album.
Okay, so I would definitely also agree that and it could easily been higher than the Dynasty. It could probably even been higher than American Gangster because I think when I go into the Jay-Z catalog, these are the songs that I gravitate to. Is the ones that are on Reasonable Doubt and the ones that are on Volume One. It's Friend or Foe 98. That
Mhm.
is like on every workout mix I've ever made in my entire life. And then Rap Game
DJ
Crack Game.
Premier.
I
Yeah,
absolutely I'm obsessed with those two songs. So this is why I'd like for standalone, and I think yeah, there's different songs that are there. Do I wish that things could have ever been different with Sauce Money? I think the world got deprived of how good I think Sauce Money could have been, and
Yeah.
how he sounds on Face Off with Jay-Z, I
Face
think
Off. Oh man.
is amazing. Um, but this is why I have the album here. I could easily just say, wake up tomorrow, rewrite it, and I probably would move it like three albums higher. But volume one of the first three volumes, this is where this ends up. So that is number eight.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? I agree with you. Face Off is one of those slept on tracks. They're rapping along to an African classic song, Soul Makossa. So, it definitely, for me culturally, hear Jay-Z and Sauce Money rapping on that kind of beat and just
Yeah,
doing what they're doing. It's amazing. It's definitely one of those that people, if you haven't heard Volume 1, definitely go out of your way to listen to it. I think
yeah,
I'm at number 9 now.
yeah,
Number 9. So number 9 for me. This is where it starts to get a little hazy because I mean, from number 1 to number 9, like he's got a lot of good albums, but like he doesn't have like 17 great albums. But number 9 for me, Volume 3. I
okay,
feel this is another big sounding album, major production. Personal favorites on this album, NYMP. There's Been a Murder. I love those two tracks. They're not, they weren't really singles, but just Jay-Z just flowing, just rapping. Um, you know, Interesting subject matter. This is the album with Big Pimpin'. So I mean, it tells you
yeah,
where he is, with the magnitude of what the flossing and the bravado. You kind of get the point with that. And this is kind of also around the time of his court trial. So there's themes, there's songs like Dope Man and
yeah,
things of that sort there where it's definitely testy, interesting lyrics that he wasn't really wrapping up prior to it. And it kind of sets the scene with the album as well.
yeah. Okay. So number nine would be volume two. Um, and I know that that's your jam, Hard Knock Life. I think it's got a lot of pieces collectively. I think it's the album a lot of people gravitate to beyond, say, the three or four classics that we mentioned already. People love that song, Hard Knock Life. I don't like it at all. I don't like that song at all. It's just it's to me it's so, but but I would say in the same breath, it makes me feel like it reminds me, or I draw the parallel to I Can by Nas that's on Godson. Like
Yeah,
it's so kid singy, like, and
it's very campy.
I'm not against kid friendly hip hop, like, but I can only listen to it so much. Like
Yeah.
if I'm playing in the car, I'm immediately skipping and going to the next song because I don't want to hear it.
So when it first dropped, did you like it and it got played out, or just like you never liked it?
And maybe that's what it is because it was Jay-Z's smash success. Like if and I know you know the history far better than me. He
Yeah,
was on the rocks of actually being dropped from the label. And then when this song comes out, it changed everything. This
yeah,
was a commercial, this is a $5+ million platinum album that we're talking about.
yeah,
Um, on the strength of this one single, and they flip, for those that don't know, they flip the movie Annie, they flip the soundtrack or the theme song into this hip hop song that is catchy and popular and resonates with kids, and it's not about the worst thing in the world and hanging out on street corners. Like it was such a uplifting song, but maybe I just heard it too much.
it could have been that.
And I think again, me, I'm a gritty hip hop guy, whether you're from the South, from the West, or from Detroit in the Central, or you're from the East Coast. That's what I grew up on. That's what I love. Those are the artists, outside maybe Tribe Called Quest and De La that I truly love. So I wanted gritty Jay-Z and was like, what the hell's this? This is not volume one. As I said, it was like, this isn't Friend or Foe 98. What? I don't want this. And it's like, hey, this is cool. Hey, Jay-Z's got another flavor and something else that he's doing. But the fact that this song just got so much traction, I think I lost interest in this album
Yeah.
relatively quickly. And I really was having to find avenues that I could bring this album along as part of the collection. Now, hey, don't get me wrong. I didn't buy it on tape because I had transitioned to CDs, but in that CD corner over there by my TV, that album was there along with, probably 15 albums before I went totally digital. I'm probably one of the last people in the world that went, I left tapes way later than everyone else. I left CDs way later. I'm in the late 2000s. Actually, that's a lie. I'm in the 2010s and still playing CDs. I'm I had a CD player in my car until about 4 years ago. And actually, the thing that I want for Christmas is a CD player so I can play albums that are not on any streaming platform, because there's some great mixtapes that I have, like
Yeah.
the whole Mystic era, mixtape era, excuse me,
Yeah.
is totally lost because you can't find them digitally.
That's
So
true. That's very true. That's very true.
I think we're at
And
number 10 now.
before I get to number 10, I think what you said is very true. With Jay-Z, he definitely found a recipe that worked in terms of, putting out a collection of songs that would sell a lot of records and just be so played out that you would be annoyed by it. And you would hear this kind of theme later on in his career with other albums as well. So I understand that. But
Yeah.
at that point there, it's legendary. And I mean, Hard Knock Life, who doesn't know Hard Knock Life, right?
Yeah.
Number 10 for me is The Blueprint 2. The
Okay.
Gift and the Curse, double album by Jay-Z. I feel this album is wedged between two classics. So if you're wedged between two classics, I mean, this is Jay-Z skill-wise, just on a different level. But the Blueprint, the first Blueprint was a classic that didn't get treated like a classic when it happened, or when it first came out, because it dropped in 9/11. It happened around the Nas
Hmm.
week. There was a whole collection of things that didn't allow Jay-Z to get the flowers he needed for that album there. And with that there, you could tell with this next album, the follow-up, he's still a little upset about these things. This is the album where he kind of parlays, his energy into working with Beyonce. The first '03 Bonnie and Clyde's on this album. That's beginning that dynamic right there. To
Yeah.
me, it's a great album, but there's a lot of filler. He definitely did try to cut it down by releasing the Blueprint 2.1, but it still wasn't really hitting the mark.
Yeah.
It was, you could tell that he still had some things he wanted to say that he didn't get off his chest in the Blueprint, the first one. People didn't receive it as well as it should have been. I mean, we're talking about it as, one or two of his greatest albums. People didn't see it that way. They thought he was a loser because of the Nas battle at that time there as well. So I think mentally he was thinking about his place in hip hop and he wanted to do things differently. And it showed in the music. Good album. I think that Hovey Baby and Guns N' Roses are the better tracks on the album, but
Yeah.
you could cut a lot off that album and it could still be
Yeah.
really good. So I think that's why it's not higher on this list.
So what number are we at?
That was number
Was
10
that
for me.
that was 10? Are you sure not 11? No, I
I
think you're
had,
right.
yeah, I have my number 10 here. So
Okay, so I think we're at 10. So I will say that number 10 for me, and I just thoroughly enjoyed this album. It was the time that it came out. So I worked in a store in a mall, and the stock guy of the store had a CD player. And I remember these guys would always visit the store. They were sneakerheads. They would buy stuff all the time. And they'd also sell mixtapes, mixed CDs. And then they also start selling burnt CDs. So in this particular case, they sold me Best of Both Worlds. We put
oh
it
my
in the
goodness.
back, and let me tell you, this thing had a run like you would not believe. We played it so much, and it had so much life. My apologies,
Really?
my nose is running.
All
Um,
good.
but it was absolutely a classic. And I'll take back the word classic because that gets just overused. It was just a fun album to listen to and hear Jay-Z. Now, is this Jay-Z's pinnacle of rapping? Is the production top notch? I would say no and no. But was it a fun album to listen to? Yes. And
Mm,
it was thoroughly enjoyable. I think when you think about an energy album and you just have two significant camps coming
yeah.
together, and it's different than Kanye and Jay.
Yeah.
There's relatability with R. Kelly, and whatever you think about R. Kelly is one thing, but having these two people come together was amazing. Now they did another album; it was terrible, and it's near the bottom of my list, but
Yeah.
I have as number 10 Best of Both Worlds because I thought it was just fun.
Yeah, I mean the name. I mean, best of both worlds. I remember the excitement when that album was coming out. I was like,
Yes,
oh my God, like Jay-Z and R. Kelly. Like it was literally the two best guys in their, in hip hop and in R&B doing the thing together. And it's not quite number 10 for me. But I felt that, with that album, just to make my comments on that, I felt it should have been a better album. But I think that, just what was going on around the album kind of, slowed it down. And the one thing I think held it back for me was I don't think it was either Jay-Z at his best or R. Kelly at his best. I think it was kind of like
I
they were
agree.
trying to, play a weird game of leverage and find out, okay, is this an Jay-Z album? Is it an R. Kelly album? I think if if they kept making albums, they might have maybe had a great album 4 albums into
Yes.
it, but it was so rough and it was just you couldn't get the idea or the sound they were really trying to get out, or at least I couldn't. But I get the idea of playing it, and there are some bangers. I mean, that one song, Best of Both Worlds,
Yeah.
it's amazing and
Yeah.
everything. So I definitely get it. For
Okay.
me, my number 11, so I know we're moving forward in this list. My number 11, you mentioned it earlier, is Dynasty.
Okay.
I mean, Dynasty, like I said, I felt it was a strong attempt of him trying to give Rockefeller artists some shine. Production wise, one of his best, some real strong strong cuts. Bink did his thing there with, change the game. And, I felt, 1-900 Hustler is one of the greatest beats. Freeway whips that track apart completely. You go to the intro of the Dynasty, one of the greatest opening hip hop tracks of all time to this day. I mean, you can put that in the top five or album openers. Dynasty's a strong album. I just felt that, if you take Jay-Z's verses off there, and there's a significant verses that he's not rapping on, it throws the album off a little bit. So I feel
Yeah.
like it was just a Jay-Z album that would have been higher on the list.
Gotcha. Okay. Number 11, I got volume three. Um, of all three volumes, my least favorite. Um, volume one is first, volume two was second, and volume three is my least favorite. I just didn't like how it didn't sound the same. And I think my perception of Jay-Z is different than other people's perception of Jay-Z. Like the Jay-Z that I love, as I've shared, is the American Gangster,
Mhm.
um, and a little bit of the Black Album, but the Reasonable Doubt Jay-Z, and
Yeah,
many other people like the Blueprint Jay-Z or the Volume 1, 2, 3 Jay-Z. So it's different strokes for different folks, and this is why this album falls way below some of the other ones that I've already mentioned. So
yeah.
give us your number 12.
Number 12 for me. This is like now from number 12 on is where I really think it's challenging.
Is we're in the gritty zone now.
Blueprint 3 is number 12 for me. I feel this is the Jay-Z Things You Can Still Hang album. I mean, you look at like the features, you got Kid Cudi, you got Kanye, you got Drake, you got J.
Mm-hmm.
Cole. I mean, it's him trying to rap with younger rappers. He's still doing his thing, but he didn't mesh with them. They didn't have their footing in the game just yet. So it's kind of like he's trying to rap over these guys and trying to minimize them. It'd be interesting to hear him rapping with these guys today because they run the game. But you could tell that he knew they were coming up, so he wanted to kind of position himself next to them, and it didn't really deliver as well as it should have. Also, I wasn't crazy about the name Blueprint 3. It was like he was trying to revisit some old success, and it just didn't hit for me. But it's a Jay-Z album. There's definitely going to be the
Yeah,
bangers, strong production, on to the next one. That's, everyone knows that track right there. I feel the opening track, What We Talking About, is an amazing track, along with Already Home with Kid Cudi on the hook. I feel those are two standout songs. This album is actually the album that's remembered for DOA, where he killed autotune.
yeah.
But
I think that's the most memorable part of the entire album.
that's the thing, right? And if you look at it now, like years later, it's almost like, oh, that's his cranky old man album. So it's,
Feel you
get
on
off
that
my
one.
lawn, like it's the songs are there, but it was just kind of a weird phase for Jay-Z. He was trying to fit into a game they were trying to phase him out of, and he was still being an exec, but also still being a rapper, and it just didn't really hit the mark for me.
Yeah, yeah. My number 12 is Blueprint 2. Um, Gift and the Curse. I think there's some songs that you definitely. I love the MOP song. Like I think
Yeah,
Jay-Z and MOP are magical to that. Like the first time I heard them was on MOP's record 4 Alarm Blaze, and I think they just fit well together.
great combo. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think and I would just I'll take a stab at every single person that's put out a double album from Outkast to Nas to Tupac to Jay-Z to Biggie. It's so hard to have a collective
Oh,
2 album project for it not to sound like there's too much filler in it.
yeah,
Like it's just not cohesive enough when you have 26 to 28 songs on it. And that's what kills this album. I think if
yeah.
you strung together 14 songs, this album would have been so much higher on my list.
Agree.
But because it's 20 some odd songs, it just doesn't it doesn't hold weight. You're skipping songs to get to the songs that you really like. So
Yeah.
again, Blueprint 2 is 12 on my list.
Number 13 for me, Kingdom Come. Uh,
Ooh,
yeah, another clunker. I mean, I wouldn't say clunker, but this came off of an interesting time. It was a 2.5 year layoff from rap, but he was still kind of rapping. But I mean, like, he was retired at a point. This is his return album. Major production. I think the majority of it was produced by Dr. Dre, which was different for him because
yeah,
Brooklyn, Dre's in the West Coast, so kind of clash of sounds there. I don't think it was Dre really even at his best. I don't think Jay was at his best. I mean, obviously he was a little bit rusty there. Subject matter, nothing really of significance to me, to be honest. I mean, it was
yeah,
kind of like that recipe, just trying to make hits, songs that become hits or whatnot. But he was in that weird spot of still kind of being an exec as well. So, what he was rapping about didn't really resonate or didn't hit like it previously would. I do
hmm
think this is maybe one of the more forgettable albums for Jay-Z. I wouldn't be surprised if he regretted making it, but it was cool to see him back.
yeah,
Like I felt the debut single was Show Me What You Got. I didn't like
yeah.
that one.
No,
So
no. It was catchy to have an album for Jay-Z after 2 years, but that's exactly what happened with this one is, it just didn't, it had no staying power because there was no
mhm.
subject matter behind anything that he was rapping about. And
Yeah,
again, this is the thing, like creating an album with Dr. Dre, it can be phenomenal, like what we've got with Eminem, or it can be forgettable. And I think that's the problem why so many things that have been created by Dr. Dre. It's not like the guy's not busy. He creates things, and then you either get a masterpiece or you get an utter failure. And
yeah,
like the upper echelon, what he's done with obviously 50, what he's done with Eminem, what he did with the game, what he did with early Kendrick, those are masterpieces. But then
yeah,
you get stuff like what he did with Rakim, and that stuff doesn't get released. I think
yeah,
that's where Jay-Z got, or sorry, Dr. Dre got so selective. If it doesn't sound incredible, it's not coming out.
yeah,
This is why we never got Detox,
yeah. I'm
because
still holding hope.
the word went out that Detox was coming, and decades later, we still haven't got
Too
Detox.
much pressure he put on himself for
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
100%. So we have a Snoop album coming out in 10 days or whatever it is, but this is why there's a lead up to this album versus using another name and calling it Detox. Like
yeah,
Detox, like essentially that is in the vault that's never coming out because there's too much pressure that this is the Detox that we got, and everyone's going to think differently of Dr. A.
yeah,
He'd be
yeah.
a fool, and he's a smart businessman for his brand and for the dollars and cents. He ain't releasing that album ever. He'll call it
Expectations are
something
too
else.
high. Yeah, there's no way it can live up to what we expect it to be. I get it.
Yeah. So what was that? 13?
That was 13 for me.
Yeah. So Blueprint 3 is 13. You've got to kind of give us the run of show. It's comparable to Blueprint 2, but I think this is where we started to lose the Jay-Z, or at least I started to lose the Jay-Z that I was a huge fan of. You know, this is where we can call it a decline, but like we're now at 13 albums. And if I'm
Yeah.
saying this is the 13th, there's a lot of people that their best album is not as good as this one.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Um, so relatively speaking, this is where this one falls within the catalog without giving any more context than what you give. So we said it's 16. So now we're getting down in 33. Who just
Yeah.
give us those three that you have. You don't have to give too much context. So I don't think we
Okay.
need to spend a ton of time talking about the three worst albums in the catalog.
All right. So number 14, best of both worlds for me. I mean, like I said, you're not getting either of them at their best. Number 15 for me, Magna Carta, Holy Grail. I mean,
Yep.
Jay-Z goes super pop mainstream, lots of hype, super underwhelming, good production, but he felt underplaced on the album. I didn't think
Yep.
it just wasn't working for me. Last album for me, Unfinished Business, Best of Both Worlds Part 2. I mean,
Yeah.
second attempt at a joint album, tour fell apart, allegations made it bad, just started the beef, just throw it up, just throw it in the river. It's yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I got the same scope. So I got Magna Carta at 14. I got Kingdom Come at 15. And I think there were some pop or up tempo songs that were on Kingdom Come that I liked, but like as a collective album, it was not that good. And then yeah, Unfinished Business, far and away the worst album that
Should
he's put
never
out.
come out. Never should have been made.
So let me ask you, because I didn't rank it, but I just would, for context, is we're going to now move on this very long discography that took us to go through. But I think it was important to level set where we are,
Yeah.
and we got to talk about how many classics that we have. But where did you rank the Linkin Park album?
I actually had that at okay, I had that at 14 between Kingdom Come
Okay.
and Best of Both Worlds. I mean, the mashups were cool. Because it wasn't original songs is what kind of hurts it, but these were like the great Jay-Z songs. So these are songs that
Yeah.
everyone knew at that point, H to the Izzo and Encore, things of that sort there. So you couldn't go wrong. I mean, it wasn't like he was giving you lyrics that sucked or songs that sucked, but nothing new. I mean, it was just a cool different sound, and sonically I liked it. It for me, it came out at a time where I was in high school, going to university, playing football. We'd work out and hear this album all the time in the locker room. So definitely move the needle for big time for me.
And I can see why that works as a football song because you have different cultures coming together. So you
Yes,
got Linkin
yes.
Park playing, that's okay with some people. You have Jay-Z
Yeah,
playing, that's
exactly.
okay. You have both playing at the same time, that's okay for some too. So it is a great crossover album for that reason. And I've been in locker rooms and they play rock and people hate it, and then people play NWA and they hate it. So
Yeah, so a
this
little
is
bit
a
for
good album.
everybody,
So I
right?
definitely could see why
Yeah,
that album, in your football season got a ton of run. So
absolutely.
let's talk about classics. I think
Let's
that's
talk
always
classics.
the big, you know, conversation with Jay-Z. How many classics do you think Jay-Z has based on what we said on the catalog? I think you kind of alluded to it already, but give us how
I
many
have,
classics that you have.
I have them listed as five classics:
Okay.
Blueprint, Reasonable Doubt, Black Album, Volume Two, and Watch the Throne.
So you think Watch the Throne is a classic?
I think it's a classic. I mean, I can define what a classic is to me and explain why I watched it on the classic, but I think it's
Go for
more
it.
than anything, I think it's just the magnitude of that album and how it came out. That album came out, and I remember that album came out when every album was getting leaked. Every album you heard at least 70 to 80% of that album before the album was released in the stores or whatnot. And Watch the Throne didn't. It was completely locked up until it came out. And then the first time you heard it was the first time everybody else heard it. So
Yeah.
everybody was experiencing it in real time and having real emotions, and nobody could really kind of taint it on a journalist or another listener's perception at that point there. So Watch the Throne, definitely in terms of just the aura and the environment, classic that point there. At the same time, like we mentioned, I mean Jay-Z and Kanye at their primes just rapping, just real big raps,
Yeah.
big sounding album. I feel like there are songs on that album. I mean, Niggas in Paris, No Church for the Wild, Who Gonna Stop Me. These are songs that no matter where or what you're doing, these are gonna resonate with you as well. So I feel it's a strong classic.
Okay. So I got Jay at three,
Oh yeah,
and it's a top three. It's Reasonable Doubt, Black Album, and the Blueprint. Those are three. Now I will qualify that maybe two of his albums, 444 and Watch the Throne, those are modern day classics. But I think if I were to look at the stretch of 51 years of hip hop, I don't
Mhm.
think anyone's reaching for 444 or Watch the Throne, unless you're a hip hop fan from the last 10 to 15 years. And hey, there's lots of people that do podcasts and video content on hip hop, and that's the pocket. Like they will tell you more about Griselda and Kid Cudi and some of the artists that are out today, but they're not talking about Kane. They're not talking about LL
Yeah,
is the most important. And I will say this on every podcast that I record for the next millennium, that LL Cool J is the most important rapper in the history of rap. And the single reason why is he broke literally every barrier for everyone else to follow. It just happened to be first, but he was the essentially first rap superstar that we ever had. The first
yeah,
person to go into commercials was LL. The first person to break the mold of wearing Adidas and Pumas. He
yeah.
on the back of radio, he's wearing the band Jordan 1. Um, he is the one that broke into TV. He is
Yeah,
the one that helped break into movies. He is the one that now owns part of Sirius Red or Rock the Bells, like its
Yeah.
whole brand.
Grammys host for what, 10 years? I mean,
Grammys whole, like he's just done so many things that other rappers of us aspire to, and like he has paved the way for so many people. And again, I don't want to deviate because this is really about Jay-Z. I mean, I'm sure in the grand scheme of things, Jay-Z also really admires LL and probably took some of the business savvy and is now magnified into what we have as the first $1 billion hip hop mogul that we've ever had. But
yeah.
LL is the first that broke so many barriers. And without LL, we may not be where we are today because of that. And it may take 10 more years. It may take till he passes away. But we're going to go back in time and like think about the lineage of hip hop. You're going to say, holy crap, LL did all of this.
I know.
He's the most important. But anyways, let's go back to Jay-Z for a second and continue our journey here. I really think that when we talk about modern day classics, I think we have to kind of qualify that now.
Yeah.
It's a thing. And I think an old head like me doesn't want to call anything a classic that, didn't come out, before 99. Like some people say the last classic you can say is maybe the Blueprint, or maybe it was DMX's,
No, but I
it's
mean,
hot and it's
no.
no,
You
and
have
I'm saying
to
like,
accept the
but some
modern day
people are
classic.
some people are so
Yeah.
skewed that say that there was no classics after 99. And and
Oh
I
my
and I
God.
don't I think you have to give, I'm glad that I've been a fan of the music literally for 4 years.
Yeah.
And I can see that there's been such some amazing projects that have come out in the last 10, in the last 5, in the last 2 that need to be recognized as their own class. If you don't want to call it a classic all the way, I think we now, the word has been a buzzword that's out there, or a buzz phrase, the
That's
modern
fair.
day classic. So 444, in my opinion, along with Watch This Throne, if you're not calling it a classic, it's a modern day classic.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. Like 444 to me, when I heard it around that time, I was thinking like, it was in classic territory.
Yeah,
I think it was received as well as it should have been. Like I said, it was kind of speaking to, a certain demographic. It was more towards, I think, the male side of things, speaking to men and kind of just dropping lessons. But I think that would probably be the next thing up for me in terms of the classic spot there. But I had the five. I had Blueprints, Reasonable Doubt, Black Album. I mean, those are undisputed. And, I felt just off magnitude, Volume 2 and Watch the Throne definitely are
yeah,
classics, but I feel that, 444 will be the next one beyond that
yeah.
as well. And
Okay.
when it comes to classics, I mean, we can talk, I know there's a lot of delineation over what is a classic and what isn't. And I thought about this earlier today. So I felt that for something to be a classic, it has to kind of check off three areas. Can I share those with you?
Please.
All right. So for me, for an album to be deemed a classic, it firstly has to be a cohesive album that withstands the test of time. I mean, it has to sound new every time you hear it, but you have to be able to kind of put yourself in the time it was created at the same time. So if this is an album made in 92, I want to hear it and be able to see or hear or feel what it like to be in 92 at the same time in 2024.
Okay.
Um, there needs to be an amount of success that comes with the album, whether commercially or critically. I think and like you talked about, nothing past 99. I know we used the source and the 5 mic scale in the past as kind of like what would determine a classic before. And I feel that we have to continue using that. I mean, those journalists and those listeners devote a lot of time into kind of getting some credibility and some traction with that scale. But I mean, obviously, what happened with Benzino and Eminem kind of, took the source out of really contention for really being a source of, hip hop knowledge. But I still
Yeah.
think we got to consider what they said there. And I think we can use the templates of what they use there and kind of speak to the future. I think we have enough equity and enough experience, enough understanding of what would be a hip hop classic to say the future should sound like this, or this in the future is a classic. And simply, there needs to be a strong percentage of memorable or standout songs on the album. I mean, if it's an album with like one or two out of, let's say, 12 songs that are really good, it can't be a classic.
Yeah. Okay. That's good criteria. Um, yeah, I don't think it changes my mind significantly um of what's a classic. I think I would reevaluate now based on that criteria some of the other albums that have come out and that get deemed as a classic, or and I love your comment about the source and the five mic. Like, if you grew up in the 90s or even in the 80s, like that
Yeah.
was the standard
Mhm.
of whether an album was good or not. And hey, depending on the writer, I think they missed on some albums. And this is why, if you go and hit the source and five mics and Wikipedia, in recent years, they've actually gone back and
Oh,
reevaluated some albums that did not get five mics and now given them five mics. So a couple random ones that I have in my head. So the one of the first albums ever to get five mics was Tribe Called Quest's first album. Um, but then really, I think in the call it the apex of the source, Nas album. It's a 19-year-old rapper. He gets
yeah.
five mics for Illmatic. But then we had some other amazing albums that came out the same year. And again, this is 2024. So 30 years ago, we got Ready to Die. Ready to Die only got four and a half.
That's
Ready to
great.
Die has now gone back. They've gone back and redone and said, Ready to Die, only built for Cuban Links, Midnight Marauders, just
Funny
looking at
stuff.
my wall here, the infamous, um, Mecca and the Soul Brother. All of those have gone back and they've given five mics to.
Oh, so they originally didn't even have five. Those
They
albums
didn't. None of those albums got five mics. There was four and a half. I think even to the point that they missed on some albums like The Shining that should have got. I probably would say that it's four and a half. I think albums like that they missed. I'm not saying that album specifically, but albums they gave like three and a half mics to, they took it to five because
yeah,
as it stood the test of time
that's the
and
time.
as it
Yeah.
was discussed, like
Yeah.
how impactful that album was, like, holy crap, were we on crack? Were we drunk? Were we high and on, drunk off 40s when we wrote the review for this? Because we totally missed what the culture has told us for decades. So they've gone back and done it. So
It's a
that's a
shame.
listen for anyone.
Yeah.
Go back and or read for anyone. Go back and look at how many albums have now been given five, because again, it was such a scrutinized
Yes.
piece that you couldn't, like, could you actually get five mics? I think Midnight Marauders, again, as I said, didn't get five mics. Low End Theory did. That was
Mm.
one of the first albums before Illmatic that got five mics. And then it was like, how do you where do you come up with a five mic
Yeah.
album? But
I'm,
then, as time moved on, there were more and more albums that got, like, hey, Dark Twisted Fantasy, I got five mics. I
yeah.
want to even tell you Nicki Minaj's Pink Friday got five mics.
Did it
I
really?
think because I think Nicki Minaj at that point, and again, this is when the ratings really
Yeah.
essentially were coming to an end of them publishing and putting it out there. The strength of what she did on Monster, on
Yeah.
Dark Twisted
Yeah.
Fantasy, and
Mhm.
that led to just the personas and all the different things she was doing. When
Correct.
you talk about one of the points that you made, does it sound like a cohesive album? I'm not a fan of Nicki Minaj, but Pink Friday does sound like a whole
Yeah, I get
collection
you.
of so many different things.
Yeah.
No different than, like, hey, can you play one or can you play three songs on the Minstrel Show by Little Brother? No, you can't. You have to play the whole thing
The
beginning to
whole
end
thing. Yes.
because
Yes.
it's a story. It
Yeah.
fits so well together. But at the same time, albums like that people didn't see the story or didn't take, weren't in a great space. And I think listening to an album, you have to be in a space to take it in. And I
Absolutely.
know, listen to Kendrick's music, some of it just is a flat out miss over your head. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you catch it and it's like, oh my gosh, this is a whole concept.
Way
It's
ahead
a
of the time.
poem, or it's spoken word, or it's a movie, or it's a book, and you can feel that it's flipping. The chapters are flipping of a young man's innocence. Where he's out in the car and he's out in the hood and he's not trying to get into trouble. God, this is how, like, the listening of an album is so important.
Yeah.
This is how
Absolutely.
you end up at a space where it can be so important, and it can totally throw what people think about an album and ultimately throw someone's career, because if that doesn't align and it's not, as you saying, commercial success is one thing, but if it's not critically acclaimed, that is
Yeah.
almost more important than the commercial success, because I think critically you can build on the success of your career and people can hear your music. But if those that are reviewing your material or your work don't believe in it, that's where you run into a problem that you may just feel like you're spinning your wheels because you're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Okay, so as we continue to push forward on everything Jay-Z on Sneaks, Rhymes, and Life, so do you think he needs to make another album?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's inevitable. I think as long as he can rap, he's liable to drop at any time. I mean, what was it, a year or two ago at the Grammys, he closed out the show with a 10-minute verse. I mean,
Yeah,
like, if that doesn't tell you that, there's a, a demand for him to drop an album that's there. The one thing I like and I feel that he's done consciously is he's positioned himself in life and in the culture by studying the greats, like the Michael Jacksons, the Frank Sinatras, and he realizes that he can't just consistently drop albums all the time like he used to. His last album was what, 2017,
yeah,
and he has dropped some since. I mean, too much circulation makes the price go down. We want a Jay-Z album so much more because we haven't gotten one, and I think he knows that, right? But at the same time, he has to live his exact life and do things and create, a hunger at the same time. So
yeah,
I think it's inevitable. I wouldn't, I wouldn't be surprised if we get one next summer, to be honest.
yeah. I think if you think of the Stings and the Elton Johns of the world, that these guys make albums
Exactly.
all the time, like Jay-Z and LL. Like LL just dropped an album. LL's been out since '84,
Yeah.
and he just dropped another album totally produced by Q-Tip. So is it within the excuse me, is it within the realm of possibility? Absolutely. Do I think he needs to do it? No, he doesn't. And do I think he does it? I don't think so. That's my opinion. I think he's done like a collective, cohesive album because
Yeah.
I think when you talk about lineage and legacy, the impact of 444 is we both talked about 444 being in the top 5 or 6 albums of his entire discography. Why does he now need to maybe come out with another Kingdom Come by chance?
Yeah.
He may think it's good. He may think, hey, geez, I'm going to get DJ Premier to produce it, and it misses the mark.
Yeah.
Hey, we're about to go into some deep waters here because we got to now talk about the beef between Nas and Jay Z. But Nas had like a third career when he did 6 albums with Hit Boy. And did
Yeah.
anyone know that that would stick? Did anyone know that in many Nas fans like myself, that was some in many people's eyes, that's some of his best work. Like I'm in several Nas chat groups and we throw the discography. I'm just like, where does Magic 123, KD 123 rank? And so many people tell us it's in the top half. Tell us it's in the top 5. Like we're talking, it was written, Illmatic, Stillmatic, and now we're talking about Lost Tapes and probably KD3 and then Magic 1. Like that's what people think about
Yeah.
the most recent stuff that he's come out with, and that's 30 years since he dropped Illmatic.
Yeah.
So it's not like Jay-Z can't do it. He definitely can. I think where he is in the world of business and his
Yeah.
life, I just don't think he wants to invest the time now. I totally agree with you because if any one artist is solidified, the hunger model is Kendrick Lamar. And I didn't
Yeah.
think Kendrick Lamar would be woven into this somehow, but how many times have we been begging? Like we begged for an album since Damn, and we got Mr.
Yeah.
Morale and say, hey, people, some people didn't like it, and then it's the
GNX.
same thing. You play it as an entire from start to finish, and it's like, well, holy crap, I just got it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then now we say, oh well, Drake essentially woke Kendrick up, and it's like, you need to make some music. People need you. And but the parallel between Jay Z and Nas is so interesting when you think of one that had the throne or wants the throne, and someone coming in and challenging where people are saying that this guy actually has the throne, you don't, and
Yeah.
how it transpired, and then where you're at now. It's very interesting to draw some parallels between the two of them now in
Yeah.
2024. What's happened with because like again, like geez, Drake is damaged goods right now, and
Oh man.
Kendrick is sitting on top of the world.
They're joining the hip though, it's just like Jay-Z and Nas. At the end of the
Yeah,
day, like you're always gonna think about Drake and Kendrick. You're always gonna think Jay-Z and
yeah.
Nas. come together.
But
Or
but
even
I but
together.
I but it's no different that Ali needs his Frazier. Yeah, Ali needs his George Foreman, right?
Yeah.
That's the way, we can talk, to the or late 90s. Like Roy Jones Jr. needs his Antonio Tarver. Like there needs to be
Yeah,
an opponent that is at
absolutely.
your level or above, and you need to challenge them if you're taking essentially you're fighting for what we call the hip hop throne. So
That's the only way.
there's a lot to get into. We don't need to, you know, turn up everything. But what were your thoughts? Like, where were you when the beef between Jay Z and Nas happened?
I was in grade 9 and I was like
Okay.
having arguments every day in between class about, Jay-Z was still the best rapper and everyone thought Nas was better and everyone thought and I was in like denial, I won't lie, because I was such a Jay-Z fan. I thought Ether wasn't good. I didn't like what I didn't want to like what Nas was putting out there. I was that much of a Jay-Z fan, but I mean, you would hear it and you're just like, man, like, this is so disrespectful. Like, how can this guy come back from this? Like, it's impossible. So, as a Jay-Z fan, it was a major hit. Like, I understand where Drake fans are today because I
Yeah.
felt when Jay-Z was doing this thing, it was hard to almost accept, the whole situation. Hard to accept the situation, but it was you hope that he would do better, and he did, But for me, it's tough because I felt Jay-Z was at his prime in Blueprint One. Like I said, I thought he was at his
Yeah.
best, and the Nas beef kind of threw it off. It was a bad time. Bootlegging was heavy, so the album was kind of out there. 9/11. The dude didn't get to enjoy his success as the king of rap. I felt that he had to throw him at Blueprint One, but the other things kind of distracted that, and he didn't get to
Yeah.
enjoy what was going on. So the beef with Nas, it was a legendary thing because we weren't used to seeing Jay-Z with blood on his chin. We weren't used to
No.
seeing him having to, play defense and come from behind. And it was his own doing. He was fighting dirty, and Nas, better. He was better at his own game. But I think that it was a necessary situation for hip hop. It brought out the best and the worst of both of them. You recall Jay-Z was also beefing with Prodigy from Mobb Deep and had that
Yeah.
whole
That's why Prodigy ended up in the song, the
yeah,
takeover.
exactly, right. And takeovers, and the whole scene at Summer Jam and everything. But I truly believe, the shame that Jay-Z had from taking that L and that beef, and the embarrassment that it gave him, it caused him to reroute his career and to look at becoming transcendent. It was, I went to Hot 97 and I was expecting that they were going to say I won the battle, and everyone rejected me to my face, so I'm better than I don't need you guys. And I felt that he was looking at, what, I'm bigger than hip hop. I'm gonna associate myself with people who are bigger than hip hop. I'm gonna be an executive. I'm gonna be the president of Def Jam. I'm gonna have Beyonce at my side. I'm gonna do things and make sure that it's stated that I am this big of a deal. The Fade to Black documentary and all the executive stuff. And I figured that, he was better off for having the beef. Sometimes you need to take an L to have a major W in the end. So, it was definitely, for me being a Jay-Z fan, it was hard to accept, but I think it was the best thing. He was getting complacent in a sense, like who knows what would happen if he didn't go with that beef. It would have been maybe more lazy raps, or, maybe he
Yeah.
wouldn't have gotten better. But I felt, it was a good thing for both of them. And I'm especially happy to see they're cool now. It's cool to see,
Yep.
that, years later you can say these nasty things, you can do these nasty, crazy things, and you can still be gentlemen in the day.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like, how would I say? We go into the going to the safari. It's like you know a wounded lion in a corner being Nas, and he was in a bad spot. Family wasn't well. Finds out on this track that his girlfriend cheated on him. Baby mom's no, his mom is not well. He just put out an album, not too long ago, Nostradamus, and it was not
Good.
it was not critically, like, we talk about Nostradamus today as arguably being the worst Nas album in his entire discography. So he's on the low, and you know, it was a song that was ultimately part of Stillmatic that came out in December. Like, we're talking right around this time. I think it actually came out on December 4th purposely, because that is the lineage between the two of them. Jay Z's put out albums or tracks on the same day as Nas is put out. projects on purpose because I think there's still this
Yeah.
underlying current of the beef. And again, for those that don't know, that the beef goes back, and I think both of them have different views of what happened. But I think in Jay Z's eyes, Jay Z wanted Nas to be part of Reasonable Doubt, and Nas, whether he was drunk, hungover, doing something with somebody else, he didn't show up to the recording session. So Jay Z took it as a major slight, and it ultimately never worked out that they had ultimately ever working together. And then as you listen to, volume one, volume two, volume three, you hear him talk about competitors,
He's baiting him. He's baiting
and
him the whole time. Yeah.
he's continually like, this is no different than the Kendrick and Drake
No.
years on years of subliminal
He's
shots.
baiting. Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it, it took ultimately Takeover to come out directly and say, I'm taking a direct shot at you and I'm calling your name, and this is what it is. So hey, Nas being the wounded line, I don't know if hip hop, I would even say as a Nas fan, I don't know if we thought we were going to get what we got in Ether. And
No.
like Ether today is actually a phrase. Go Google what Ether is like. It is like literally ending
Yeah.
career. And granted, like he never ended Jay-Z's career, but like the hit of
Put him
where
on
Jay-Z
pause.
was
Yeah.
on such a high, it's like he literally destroyed his throne and put him on the level of everyone else. Like Jay-Z was far and above everyone else, whether you liked everything he put out or what he was doing. He thought he was untouchable. And but people kept telling him, whether it was in his camp, in hip hop, that you're not better than Nas. So until Nas has stopped rapping, I don't care if Nas made a bad album. Until you deal with Nas, or you say, you kind of flat out come out and say you're better than Nas, this is not dealt with or not solved. So he went directly at Nas, and I don't think we thought that Nas would be able to come back the way that he did. Like it still rings in my head the first time. It's like my jaw hit the ground. And I still think of one of my favorite hip hop moments because I think he tried, like Nas tried at one point to put like, start to put the beef behind him. No, this is like hip hop is dead. And, Black Presidents is a song that one of the first songs that they actually did together. But somewhere along the way, he was still doing he was performing. This is probably on the strength of the Stillmatic tour, and then there was the Godson tour shortly after his mom had passed, and I think it was the Stillmatic tour. So there was still a lot. Like I don't think we ever saw like pent up energy from Nas, um, until you saw him do. I saw it. Excuse me, him do Ether live. Good Lord,
Let it all out, eh?
it was unbelievable. It was so raw and so real. And you see, even when he's performed it like in New York or wherever,
Yeah.
it's amazing to see that this is where he's at.
You know what? I'm happy, even, retrospectively looking at it, it's like it's David versus Goliath, right? It's, like you said, that wounded lion in the corner. Like it's so important that that happened for both of them and for fans as well to see that, what, like this is what happens when you challenge somebody. And if you're at that point, there's only one way to go down, right? You can't stay at the top forever, right? Especially when you challenge someone at that level, you're that ambitious in the way you do it, and you go after a lyricist like Nas, you're going to be humbled. So, I think, definitely Jay-Z took his lumps for it, but, we as, listeners and viewers and fans, we were the ones who benefited 100%.
So let's move on from the Jay-Z and Nas piece, and then let's just talk about the rise and fall of Rockefeller Records. Because
Yeah.
again, this was at one point the most important or the most popular record label in the game. And there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of backstories that are still coming out to this day on what exactly happened between him and Dame, and what was Jay-Z making some power moves behind closed doors. But maybe give us your perspective of what happened with Rockefeller.
Yeah. I mean, one of the greatest rap labels of all time. I mean, the roster, I mean, it sprung Jay-Z, Kanye, Beanie Siegel, Cameron, Freeway, Memphis Bleak, I mean, Young Guns, like that's a solid roster on its own. I mean, overly ambitious label. It was not just music, clothing, movies, liquor. I mean, you do the Rock Diamond symbol like this, and everyone knows what it was. You know, like it was a status symbol for New York, for the culture, for everything. Um, but I think his outlook on his career post that beef, it prompted him to take that vacation in France. I remember he went away from hip hop for a bit, just to kind of collect his thoughts and his mind on, they don't accept me. What do I do? He goes away with Beyonce, and at that point, I remember Dame Dash planned to kind of expand Rockefeller, but kind of in a way where they didn't just needing to have Jay-Z. They had these new artists on there, particularly with Dipset. And
Yep.
I remember he gave Dame allowed what was it, Cameron to become the new vice president label, and Jay Z upon his return wasn't feeling any of that. So it
Yep.
created a little bit of an internal beef. Before you knew it, in 2004, the company was officially folded into Def Jam. But as you mentioned, it was kind of a foul move because Jay Z became the president of Def Jam there. So there's a lot of
Yep.
question of, did Jay Z influence these guys to sell their stocks at a lower number or whatever to get that sale to be done? I recall on, 2006 album Kingdom Come, he mentioned a line, talking about make another Hove, kind of in reference to Dame Dash because he had been
Yep.
spouting off comments about, I made Jay-Z and we made Jay-Z into what he is. And that really hurt Dame because I remember when Rockefeller split, it was you can go with Jay-Z and, his rock side, or you can go with the Dame Dash music group. And I think about 80% of people went with Dame because,
Yep.
he was a little bit more business inclined. But Jay-Z's thing was, I think if I recall correctly, he just wanted the rights to reasonable doubt and he wanted Kanye.
Yeah. That
Rest
was
is
that was
history.
it. If I have those two, that was good enough
That
for
was
him.
it, right? And I mean, he made it work. So, it's kind of crazy. If you look at it holistically, it sucks that what he did to his friends, selling the label at a lower price. So
Yeah.
they say, for him to benefit. But he's seemingly squashed all the beefs. We've seen him with pretty much all the artists on Rockefeller since. They've had appearances and they've reconciled with him at, his shows, and he's done, songs with them. But Dame Dash definitely does still seem pretty sour about things. God
And
bless
he'll
him. I
tell
don't think
everyone about how
he'll tell
sour he is.
everybody. I don't think he'll ever, I think as long as Jay-Z's successful, Dame is not going to be happy, right? So
Yeah.
it's one of those things, unfortunately, when you're successful with somebody and there's a split, and no matter how bitter it gets, both sides aren't going to be happy, and that's where it is. So, it was, it's crazy because that was the sign of Black success. Rockefeller
Yeah.
Records, it wasn't just music, it was so many things, and it's not, it's a memory now. It's crazy. You
Yeah.
would have thought this thing lasted forever.
Yeah. I know. I know. So thinking about, just some of the other things that are called the skeletons in the closet, there's all the rumors now that we've seen the fall of Diddy and all of the things that he's been involved in. And
Hmm.
and there's tons of rumors out there. Jago Wright and many other people have said Jay-Z was there. Jay-Z and Beyonce are both there and things are happening. And like again, none of this is proven, but like even just to be affiliated to with what's happening with him, like do you think Jay-Z is the next potential one that gets implicated in all this madness that's happening with Diddy?
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so I mean, you can only
Okay.
judge the guy on something until it comes up. I'll tell you this, I'm sure he hates the fact they took so many pictures with Puffy right now because,
I'm
like,
sure he does.
like it's so easy to be like, oh, see, he was here with him there. And I mean, I think he looked at Puffy as someone who was able to kind of be on equal status as like, a mogul and, as an entrepreneur and as an exec in hip hop. But, the long run, it doesn't look good on him. I
No.
hope, not just for his own sake, but his family's sake, that he's not gonna get mixed up in any of that there because
Yeah.
that'd be a major loss for us as a culture if we had to have not just Puffy, but Jay-Z go down that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. So you think about also like, and we mentioned now Beyonce a couple times now, and they're happily married with the kids, and I wouldn't say everything's wonderful because who knows what's going on behind that proverbial curtain. But just thinking about how we got Lemonade and 444, like it is two of the best albums that we've had maybe in the last 15 years, but essentially spun off infidelity, right? Like what's your opinion on, you know, the entire circumstances that kind of tie in with the two albums?
cheating on Beyonce is crazy. I mean,
It's
it's
absolutely madness.
it's madness, right? But and I know Jay-Z had this whole thing where Hov did that, so hopefully you don't have to go through that. Yeah, but like like I say, 444 is an important album because in the rap community you don't get a lot of men who are vulnerable. You don't have a lot of men
Exactly.
admitting their faults and saying that I should do things differently. And I know on the first song of 444 is a song called "Kill Jay-Z," and he has a line mentioning, I nearly went Eric Benet, nearly let the baddest girl get away. Never go Eric Benet. There's a gem right there. You can lose everything that is tied to you. And to lose a Beyonce would have hurt Jay-Z. So, she's a great woman, and I don't know the details of what happened, but for her to stick with him, it definitely shows, something to her character. And you hope that he learned from it, and you hope that he doesn't have to go through that again because of his family. And especially for the example that he's trying to set as a leader in the culture. And it's
Yeah.
important for him to share, hey, I went through this. I'm human. I make mistakes, but I can reconcile. I can make great music, and you can learn from my mistakes as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. And then, I think that the first controversy we ever get from Jay-Z is the whole Lance Rivera stabbing around, volume three. Like, I don't even know the context behind it. Like, what's your perspective on how that
So
all
I,
came to be?
I did a little bit of research because I had a perception of it the whole time, and then I looked in to see what that was before this conversation. I always understood it that Jay-Z had stabbed Lance Rivera. I think he was a label exec in the late '90s due to the bootlegging of the Volume 3 album. Before that
That's
came,
what I understood.
everyone had it there. There were rumors that Jay took the blame for somebody else and this and that. I actually came across some footage that was on Black TV,
Of
the
course,
famous tabloid show.
yeah,
And he said that Jay-Z actually never stabbed him. He said that he was surrounded by people who had knives, but Jay-Z wasn't the person who stabbed him. And he actually said Jay-Z was all sorts of great things, called him a gentleman and a poet and a great person, but he wasn't the person who stabbed him. So I don't know what's happened since. It seems like they've reconciled, but I know,
yeah.
like I mentioned, on that Volume 3 album, Jay-Z was basically very much in tune with him being on trial and making
Yes, that's
focuses
where you
on.
get dope man, as we
So you see what I'm
you
saying?
said earlier.
So who knows? Maybe it was a little contrived in the '90s. Maybe it was something that they
Yeah,
wanted to kind of create as a storyline for the album. But looking at it now and based on Lance being on Vlad TV and saying that Jay-Z didn't stab him, I guess you have to give Jay-Z the W on this one and say his hands are clean.
I guess you have to like it. And I think when you read that, okay, Jay-Z, $1 billion Jay-Z, like if you're trying to make a business deal, and we're getting into the business side of Jay-Z in a second. Here's a businessman and he stabbed someone in a nightclub about
I
an
know.
album because he
I
got
know.
leaked. Like, what type of character and morals are we talking about here? What is going to do when a business deal goes sideways? So it's interesting that now that has been to a certain extent debunked. Because again, and I think when I read as I was reading more about Jay Z, and again the last couple of weeks as we've talked about putting this episode together on his birthday, I've read more and more and more. So it's like this is one of the things, and the charge that he got probation
Yeah.
of all
Like
things. So like you
you
think
wonder.
like aggravated assault you should be doing prison time. And
You
that's not the
wonder.
case that what happened in this case.
I mean, and the thing is, he kind of had the benefit of social media not being a thing then, or there was no TMZ. So, maybe if there was, those methods of finding the details, maybe it would have come out that it wasn't what they said it was at that point
Yeah,
there. But it definitely did help sell some records. The idea maybe
100%.
Jay's in jail, all this stuff here. I mean, anytime you're on the stand, you become a little bit more notorious, and I think that he was looking
Yeah.
for that.
It adds to the persona. And then obviously, if he was getting light time, it doesn't matter.
Yes, yes.
So let's talk about Jay Z as a businessman. Like, just give us some of the business ventures that Jay Z is involved in right now.
Yeah, yeah. So, as mentioned earlier, Jay-Z's made his focus on just transcending rap. He's basically become Mr. Ubiquity. He's been pretty much seen anywhere and everywhere. You look at the starting of his own label in 1995, the entrepreneurial spirit was evident and it was there. And, aside from being a part of the sale of the label to Def Jam, he's accomplished a number of things. I'll list them for you. He sold Rockaware to Iconics for $204 million. He was the first rapper with a shoe endorsement. Do you remember the S Dots by
I
Reebok?
was gonna say,
He
did
had
you
those.
have a pair?
I didn't get a pair. I got the
Uh,
mixtape and everything. I never got a pair. Like I was like, trust me, I wanted them so badly. I
in
wanted them
like
more than like basketball shoes.
yeah, in the days I was in store, I sold a lot of S. Carters.
And remember, he was like, these shoes are not made for you to wear playing sports. They're literally for you
No,
to.
it was like a Stan Smith of Reebok, but
Yeah.
it had
So
S. And then we got June. It's like the next year.
and the G-Units came as well. So he was the first with the shoe endorsement. Former part owner of the Brooklyn Nets, major part of them moving from New Jersey to Brooklyn. I mean, like that still has it still reverberates today because the team still plays in Brooklyn. The
Yeah,
design of the jersey, everything is related to Jay Z.
yeah. They
And
don't
that's
get Harden, KD, and
no
Kyrie
Kevin
without
Durant and,
JC
and
being
Kyrie
in.
Irving.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. So the Nets today, I mean, they're not the greatest team today, but the success they've had since they moved from Jersey to Brooklyn, you have to tie to Jay-Z. He's the investor and owner of Ace of Spades Gold Bottle Champagne. I mean, the gold bottles you see in the clubs and those expensive ones that people aren't really often giving away for Christmas gifts.
yeah,
Jay-Z owns those. Tidal, I mean, Tidal, it's a major streaming service. He's a major shareholder of that. He designed that with the idea of artists actually getting royalties back and
yeah,
getting some more money in the pockets, not the labels owning all that there, and you've heard a lot of it, but it's still a successful label, and sorry, a successful streaming platform as it is right now. His fingerprints are all over that, and I think his biggest success is Rock Nation, which he
yeah,
founded. A multi-purpose business that works as a label. It's a management firm, sports agency. The creation of the agency is actually why he did away with Rock Nation Sports. But he has his hands on so many different things. So he's become a brand. He has that line, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman."
yeah.
It, you know, it's right there.
Yeah, and then we gotta throw the cherry on the Sunday is like he's the ambassador for the NFL. Like
At the NFL,
of
yeah,
all
yeah.
things, and yeah, we got our controversy. Like we can't not talk about it. So we have the Super Bowl.
The
Who knows who's
Super
gonna be in
Bowl.
it? Is it gonna be the Bills? Is it gonna be the Lions? Is it gonna be your Vikings? Maybe
No.
my Commanders will actually make it to the playoffs. I don't care about the Super Bowl at this point. Let's just make it to the playoffs. If we go 10-7 and we hopefully make the playoffs, this is the life part of Sneaks Runs the Life. If we just made the playoffs, I'd be very happy because this was supposed to be a 4 or 6 win team.
You
Could it be the
guys.
Eagles? Please no, but it could happen. Could it be the Chiefs going for a 3P? I think we got a lot of possibilities. Could it be Lamar finally getting to the Super Bowl if he doesn't win MVP because Josh Allen is now the front runner? But it's in New Orleans, and Kendrick Lamar is essentially sitting on top of hip hop as a culture right now, the most
Yeah.
influential artist we have out there, but it's in New Orleans. So we don't have Cash Money as part of the Super Bowl because Jay-Z, amongst others, decided that top of hip hop, the most transcending artist that it should go to should be Kendrick. Only Nas is actually congratulated that it came
Only
out at,
one.
at GNX,
Yeah.
but Little Wayne and Cash Money and Young Money are furious that obviously that Little Wayne is not the one that is performing because Little Wayne is the biggest of the entire camp. So interesting to see, but Jay-Z
Yeah.
got his hands into that. And, I think if you think back on where we've gone with the Super Bowl and like how impactful Usher was
Yeah.
and Justin Timberlake several years ago when he put out the JT3 or his own um Jordan 3 white cement that was he only wore for the Super Bowl. And then obviously my favorite Super Bowl performance of recent time. Yeah, there's
Dr.
Michael
Dre.
and Prince for sure, but to have Dre and
Dre, Snoop,
50 and Snoop and like just roll out the whole West
and
Coast
Kendrick.
roster,
Yeah.
all of those like yeah, Kendrick's doing this on his own. Kendrick already performed at the Super Bowl like 3 years ago. I think it's 2 years ago actually that happened.
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing that Jay-Z is entrenched in making these decisions. Who thought a
Exactly.
hip hop artist would have this kind of say on essentially the biggest sporting event that we have outside the World Cup? And I have to qualify it because the World Cup is bigger than the Super Bowl. I don't care what anyone says.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I remember like what was it like? It was the Rams and the Titans Super Bowl. I think it was like late '90s, like '99. And I remember when Nelly got like just a cameo, and I was like, oh
Yeah,
man, we made it. Like
yeah,
now, like we literally almost have a 10-year run of having a hip hop performer take over the halftime show. And I mean, Jay-Z's position with that kind of, to me, it cements where he is in terms of hip hop. He's almost like the president of the culture at this point here.
yeah,
Through Rock Nation, he partners with the NFL. They manage live music for the league. So it's not just the Super Bowl, but every live performance, he decides who's doing that. So when it's opening game or Christmas, they have Beyonce performing at halftime in the ball or the Houston game. Jay-Z is responsible for all these things
yeah.
there. So the results, like you mentioned, having a Dr. Dre, having a Snoop, having a Mary J, a Kendrick, a Weeknd, an Usher, a Rihanna performance, it was unheard of like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it
Because of
just
Jay-Z,
wouldn't
we
happen.
have that, so super
But
important.
again, that's how the NFL is transcended. And I think of all people that is, can touch multiple generations at this point, Jay-Z's first album was in 96. The last album was in 2017. We're talking a 21-year run
Yeah,
of the most Grammy nominations of any nomination and win of any other hip hop artist. Like it only makes sense that
absolutely.
of all the businessmen that we have, and again, I already gave my flowers on a Jay-Z episode to LL Cool J's like we'll continue to do, but Jay-Z's it. Like you can think of what you think is as an artist, as a father, or whatever, but when you look at hip hop as a culture and the influence and the connection that he has with so many, there's no better person at this particular juncture of their career to again continue to bring artists along as part of the Super Bowl or manage one of the best um, champagne companies that we have globally. Like
Yeah.
it is Jay-Z. So these are the flowers that we need to give him. 55. Yeah, he beefed with my boy Nas, and Nas handled business. But if we have another diamond sighting, people, for those watching on YouTube. But this episode, and Isaac, I'm really appreciating that you were able to come on and give some true Jay-Z fandom context. But I think it was a great history lesson for those that
Absolutely.
took in. And did I think in the onset that this would almost go 2 hours? No, but I think there's so much for people to learn, so much for people to take in, and I think it's only appropriate that on Jay Z's 55th birthday that we will release this episode for the masses. So this will be available on Wednesday. I'm sure when you hear it, we recorded on a Monday.
Yeah.
A little bit of edit here and there. Isaac's mic went out a couple times because of the internet, but we kept
My
it
bad.
moving. It happens. It happens. In a 2 hour conversation, you didn't think it was going to happen. I probably sneezed and coughed a few times that I didn't
That's the
get to
music.
the
That's the
mute
magic
button
of
first.
editing, right? That's
So
the.
it is what it is, and sometimes I just love to leave it raw because that's what actually happens. That this is what
Yeah.
happened when people talk, and I
Yeah.
think this is why people enjoy the podcast. It's two people talking about so many different topics, but I think this was really centered around Jay Z per se, but it encompassed so many other things. And this is probably one of the first episodes in some time that I'll be honest that I normally have a very laser focused subject matter, but in this particular case, we brought it all together. We brought
Yeah.
sneaks, rhymes, and life all together in one episode. So Isaac, as we wrap up, if anyone wants to see, as you prepare for your wedding, any of your musical interests or what you decide to post on IG, how do people find you on IG?
Yeah, I don't post too much on IG, but I'll make that. I'll do what I have to do to make sure I get a better presence out there and I can better reflect this episode. So, my name on IG is I'm not Isaac, but I am Isaac. I'm not Isaac underscore at the end of it. Lionel, thank you so much for having me on this call. I was very excited for this conversation. Like I said, I've been having it for 20 plus years. So to make it official and have it on a podcast was an absolute pleasure and a thrill for me. There's so much more we could talk about, but it's good to, to honor a great man for our culture and for someone that, has shaped a lot of what we listen to and what we are influenced by. So I appreciate you allowing me to be that person to help you have this conversation.
Yeah, and I think it was an amazing conversation. I think that yeah, there's a lot of things you think about when we talk about Jay Z, because we're talking essentially, when we first heard Jay Z, this is before even we got reasonable doubt. He had a whole different rapping style. He was, was rolling with Jazzo, and he's evolved to so much in the last essentially 3 decades. Like to think that we would have a singular artist that would have so much influence over the
Yeah.
game today, and that has had influence and impact over the last 3 decades. I don't know if we ever thought that hip hop would become what it is today. I think it's like, hey, hip hop has come so far, and I think back to my early days when listening to LL and Public Enemy and Kool Moe Dee, and to think that this was just not a genre. This is like the go-to genre of now the Super Bowl, literally exclusively is kind of amazing to see where we are, and we have people that are piloting the ship, and we have the next generation also being a part of what that looks like as we move forward. So, Isaac, again, really appreciate your time. Thank you for everything and sharing your amazing insights on this pod. But that's it. The Sneaks Eye of Life Deluxe. We'll call it the Deluxe Edition. Everything Jay Z, and this is why it takes 2 hours to get it all out. And we probably still left some nuggets on the table, but that's for another day in an episode. But we out. Sneaks Rhymes in Life. Everything Jay Z with Isaac.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Take care.
You too. Have a good night.
Bye, everyone.